Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of our Bible class this morning. You may be watching this on Saturday night, Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon. Whenever you're watching, we really appreciate you tuning in and being a part of our study together. I want to encourage you to get your Bibles and turn to Romans chapter 12. We're going to be studying from Romans chapter 12 today. Romans chapter 12, we're going to study the whole chapter. We're going to try to break it down into three major parts. Hopefully you've been able to tune into our daily devotional series, and one of the things we've been talking about at length has been our Christian evidences, the idea of being able to make a defense of why we believe what we believe, to be able to make a rational, logical explanation for why we believe what we believe, and not just simply have to give people an answer that we believe because we have faith. That's a great answer, but some people are going to ask you for more. They're going to ask you for even more reason as to why you believe what you believe. And we need to be prepared for that and be prepared to give that answer. And because of that, that's what we've been studying. And in Romans chapter 12, Paul is writing this as sort of, it's near the end of the letter, and it's kind of a summation of a lot of the things that he's been talking about. And that is this idea of the transformation that you will undergo under God's guidance. God is going to lead you into a path if you will simply follow what His Word says. And in Paul's case, what he's saying is if you'll follow the teachings of the apostles, if you'll follow what I'm telling you based on my understanding of the will of God, I promise you the inspiration that God is giving him to write these things, Paul says, listen, I'm telling you, you will come out a different person. There's no way that you can truly commit yourself to God, truly commit yourself to the cause of Christ and not be changed. We're studying Romans chapter 12 because of a lot of the things that it connects. It connects our discussion about Christian evidences to our discussion from 1 John. We talked about all 5 of those chapters, and we spoke at length about how John is driving home this point to all of his readers, that God is real, that Jesus was real, and not only that, but that because He was real and because God exists fully, then you have to be changed as one who claims, as one who calls themselves a follower or a child of God. So Romans chapter 12 ties a lot of these things together. And so that's why I wanted us to study this together in this time of Bible class. Beginning in verse 1, Romans chapter 12, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. One translation uses, let's pause there for just a moment, because this idea of the spiritual worship, a lot of times that question is asked, what does Paul mean by that phrase? And one translation that I believe really sort of hits the nail on the head says rational service. So remember, we've been talking about Christian evidences. We've been talking about the book of 1 John, and we've been talking about all these logical pieces of the puzzle that John and that others have tried to piece together throughout Scripture to show that the will of God, that the purpose of God, that the creation story is very real, that God has a plan and a purpose for you. All of those things should result in something else. We've used this example before, so pardon me if you've heard this, but when we're teaching kids math, we don't teach them that 2 + 2 equals question mark. We ask them to solve the equation and fill in a number or fill in an answer for the question mark. Whenever I give a test, whenever I'm examining a kid who has been in my class, and I say, look, here's the test. I don't say, well, here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you the test with no answers on it whatsoever, and I want you just to turn it back into me with no answers on it. We demand that when there is a blank there, that we give a rational, logical answer. Why would it be any different when someone asks you about your faith? Why would it be any different when someone says, this whole God thing that you've got going on, what caused that? What brings that about? Why do you believe in God? A simple shrug of the shoulders and an I don't know, I just do is not a good enough answer. That's leaving the question mark. That's leaving it blank. And the fear is that if you leave it blank, then people get to fill in their own opinions and their own decisions about you and your faith. They take it out of your hands. They take it out of your realm of responsibility and they put their own spin on it. And therefore you get various explanations. You get things like, well, religion is just something for weak-minded people. Jesse Ventura said that just a few years ago. The former governor of Minnesota and one who makes rumblings, it seems, every presidential election that he wants to try to run this country, said on national television that religion and a belief in God was nothing more than a crutch for weak-minded people. You see, no one stood up to him. No one said, no, wait a minute, that's incorrect. You can't say that, and here's why. See, nobody has ever stood up for that sort of explanation, that vile misuse of the idea of religion, or that vile misuse of who God is, the characteristics of God. No one's ever stood up to him and said, no, you see, this is why we believe. Now, I don't know that it would have any effect on him. I'm not trying to say that it would alter his life, but truly, if he had an honest heart and was willing to listen, there's no doubt in my mind the gospel could change even his mind. If you were able to view Friday night's devotional, you heard me bring up the name Dan Barker. Dan Barker has debated Kyle Butt before, and Kyle, being a devout gospel preacher, has spoken to Dan Barker, who's a world-renowned atheist. And there's no doubt in my mind that if Dan Barker would have an honest and open heart to the message of Jesus Christ, it would change his life. And that leads to what Paul calls rational service. In other words, the idea found in verse 1 here, presenting your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, that's just what makes sense. Basically, here's what he means. Verse 2, he explains it even further. Don't be conformed to this world. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect or whole. It's the idea that the living sacrifice takes place via spiritual transformation. Now, I could tell you that you come up out of the water and you are a brand new person, and that would be true. But there's also the realization that a lot of who you were has to be changed, and that can't happen overnight. Your purpose, your direction in life may change in that very moment, and it certainly does, because now you are claiming to be a child of God. But it may take some time, and over time, that transformation that takes place leads you to then become this living sacrifice. It's what God is doing to you. It's what God is doing through you because of what God has done for you. As he picks up in verse 3 down to verse 8, there's this next section, this next explanation or discussion, if you will, of what that means. Okay, so Paul's never one to leave us in the dark on what he means. Paul's always known for delivering a detailed message, a detailed explanation of who he is, of what he's saying, and why he's saying it. He never leaves us in the dark with that. So here's what he's done in the first 2 verses of this chapter. And I readily admit that the letter was not written with chapter breaks and verses. I get that. But for the sake of our discussion today, it's almost like he sort of took a break at the end of chapter 11 and came back and said, okay, now let me go ahead and explain further what I mean. So chapter 12 begins with those 2 verses that you are familiar with, certainly, and if not, reread and reread and reread those verses over and over again. It is who you are. It's what you're supposed to be. But just in case any of us were to look at those first 2 verses and say, I'm not really sure what that means to me. Practically, 2020, what does that mean to me? Paul's never one to leave us in the dark. So beginning in verse 3, by the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith God has assigned. For as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so we, though many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith. If service, in our serving, the one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, the one who leads with zeal, the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness. We could delve into these spiritual acts of service here. We could get into those and it would be a viable, wonderful study. We don't have time for that really in this particular study, but let me just simply say this, that when Paul begins this explanation of what it means to be spiritually transformed, to be a living sacrifice, he starts by saying, live humbly. Live humbly. It's very difficult nowadays. It really is. It's very difficult in the times that we live in to find someone maybe in the public eye who is truly trying to live humbly. It's difficult for us. We might could mention this person or that person. We might could bring up a situation where someone acted humbly, but to truly make your life a humble life is a difficult thing. I was thinking and considering about this earlier. The idea of social media, I'm not going to tell you that it's all evil and terrible and wrong. I will not say that because I think of all the good things that I've seen my brethren doing on Facebook. I'm talking about preachers and youth ministers and college ministers and associate ministers and how much good has been put out on social media over these past 6 to 8 weeks. It's really been amazing. You think about even the fact that the thing that was set up just not too long ago, the 31 days of encouragement in our area here in the Shoals area, northwest corner of Alabama. And as soon as it was announced, the local paper picks it up. The Times Daily calls and says, can we do a story? And it was the front page story of the local newspaper. You think about one of the biggest view getters on YouTube over this past 6 to 8 weeks has been something called Some Good News, hosted by an actor named John Krasinski. And truly, the entire 8 episodes that were put onto YouTube got millions upon millions of views, and it simply was a 15 to 20 minute show about good things that were happening. So I'm not going to tell you that social media all in all is terrible. Social media has its purposes, it has its uses, and it has its positives. But there's also the dark side of that. Because of social media, now you see more and more people trying to make themselves famous, trying to gain and garner attention in ways that are just unnecessary. They're immoral. They're evil. You see, it's very difficult in the world in which we live to just simply live humbly. To simply live humbly. Remove the fame aspect of it and just think about it in our local congregations. It's difficult a lot of times for us to live humbly. The truth of the matter is we all like attention. We all like to be bragged on. And deep down, some of us, we really like to brag about other things. Oh, it's difficult at times. It's difficult at times to pump the brakes. Because a lot of times when someone comes up to you and says, can I tell you about something that's going on in our life it's really cool, it's really positive, we really like it. Unfortunately, a lot of times the first thing that we do is we start trying to make comparisons. We start trying to figure out ways that we have a story that might be just a little bit better. Or in some cases, sadly, just a little bit worse. It's difficult to live humbly. But when Paul says, I want to talk to you about living sacrifices and I want to talk to you about being transformed spiritually by the renewing of your mind so that you can understand better the will of God, the first thing that he says in verse 3 is live humbly. And then he doubles down on that. The second thing that he says is to look to serve. Live humbly, looking to serve. So in the first aspect, the first 2 verses, it's living sacrifice via spiritual transformation. Now in verses 3 through 8, it's live humbly, looking to serve. You want to know what it means to be a spiritual soldier for Jesus Christ? Learn what it means to be a servant. You want to know what it means to make God happy with the life that you're living? Learn what it means to obey Him And when he says, I want you to live humbly and I want you to serve others, he means it. And my life should reflect that. If I want to consider myself a daily living sacrifice, then I have to live humbly. And I have to be looking to serve others. Well, that encourages me because, truthfully, I'm one of those people that if you just tell me what you need me to do, I will get it done. Now, it may not look the exact way you thought it should look, and it may not look the exact way that I even wanted it to look necessarily, but if you tell me that something needs to be done and you say this is how it needs to be done, I will do my best to get it done the way you want it to, but I promise you I'll get it done. And in this case, here's God through Paul telling me to be a living sacrifice, to be proper and pleasing before God. Then Scott, you have to live humbly and you have to look to serve others. It's not easy. And sometimes it's not something that we want to do necessarily because truthfully we're kind of selfish. But even though it's not easy, it's certainly, absolutely, without a doubt, worth it. Then you get into the final part of this chapter, verses 9 down to verse 21. And there's sort of this list of things, as it were. And it sort of seems like Paul just started thinking about, okay, what are the top things outside of live humbly, look to serve others? What are some things that I would want other people to know about being a Christian? What are some things that I would want people to aim towards? What are some things that I would want people to lock in on? Here's what he says. Let love be genuine. Abhor or hate what is evil. Hold fast to what is good. Love one another with brotherly affection. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. And seek to show hospitality. Now let's pause just for a minute. And let's look at some of these. And let's just kind of talk about, these are not easy things. Let love be genuine. First and foremost in this list, as he says, okay, live humbly, looking to serve others. Okay, got it. Difficult, but I'm going to try my absolute best to do this. Paul then says, let love be genuine. I don't know about that. And here's why that's difficult for us. Again, the society in which we live is there's no really other way to say this. It's a dishonest society. We project images that truthfully we're really not, but that's what we want people to see. We get all dressed up, all however you want to look at it, however you want to function with it, and we say, this is who I really am. And in truth, it's not. It's our false image of what we think people would like us to be. And so therefore, unfortunately, what happens is you begin to develop feelings for the personification of what you think you want, instead of the real, genuine love that Paul's talking about here. It's sort of a running joke that in a lot of these dating service things, that's sort of a running joke. I've even seen it on commercials. It's kind of a running joke that the person that shows up is not the person that you saw in the picture. Why is that such a joke? Well, the truth is because it happens more often than it doesn't. And that's the society that we live in. And people begin to develop feelings for one another, and what they find out very quickly is the person that they met the first night is not the person that they're really getting to know. Now that's just one kind of skin surface example. But it makes the point that unfortunately what we do a lot of times is our love is not genuine. Our love is based on what you can do for me in the moment. I love you as long as you do what I want you to do. I love you as long as you say the things that I want you to say. I love you as long as, and you see what we do there? We take a lot of the genuineness, we take a lot of the honesty out of our love, and we say it's really love based on things that you can do for me, and therefore it's not genuine love at all. And Paul says, look, if you're going to call yourself a Christian, then act like one. One who lives humbly, one who looks to serve, is going to be one who loves genuinely. He's also going to be one, or she's also going to be one who abhors or hates what is evil. Look, there's no reason for you to get hand in hand with evil, ever. You should be fighting against that all the time, constantly, consistently. That should be who you are. Hold fast to what is good. It sounds so easy, and yet it's so difficult sometimes for us. Because there are things in our life, there are things that we enjoy that are not good. They're sinful. But we hold on to those things, and we want to hold on to what's good, and what we fail to realize a lot of times is when we start doing that, we begin to be pulled apart by those desires, and we wind up no better than the Laodiceans in Revelation chapter 3 that made God physically sick. Verse 10, love one another with brotherly affection. That means that's just that I want to put your needs above mine. I care deeply about you, and I care deeply about your success in life. Outdo one another in showing honor. If you're living humbly, then what that means is I'm not collecting honor, I'm showing it to others. I'm giving it away. Living humbly is the idea of I don't think of myself as less. I just think of myself less often. And I start putting you in front of me. And so I begin to show you honor. I begin to show everyone that I come in contact with as much honor as I can possibly show them. I'm trying to outdo everyone in showing honor because that's living humbly. Do not be slothful in zeal. I mean, you couldn't get two more opposite words. Slothful and zeal. Those words do not mesh. Slothful is this idea of laziness, of committing yourself to nothing. No effort, no try. Whereas zeal is, you have to be reined in. You're so eager. You're so eager to do and to please others and to try your best and to accomplish that you have to be reined in a little bit. And Paul says, look, that's a good thing. Let's brag on you for that. Don't be slothful in zeal. Push. Be fervent in spirit, he says. Serve the Lord. Aim it at the right things. Aim it at the right things. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. If there was ever a verse that really sums up our last 6 to 8 weeks, verse 12 of chapter 12 is it. I encourage you to write this down somewhere, put it on a note card, stick it in your car somewhere, stick it on the mirror so that you can look at it. Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. And then he wraps this up, and this is where we'll wrap up our class at this time. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all, if possible. So far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Let's look at just a couple of things very quickly as we close. Live in harmony, verse 16 says, with one another. I know it's difficult sometimes, but God is demanding of us to work together. Now, I don't know. Everyone that watches this may have different opinions about me personally, and that's okay. There may be some who refuse to tune into this because they hear my voice and they say, ooh, I can't hear that. There may be those who say, you know what, I just don't think I can listen to what he's talking about. I get it. And there may be some of you that don't like me personally. There may be some of you that just don't care for me as a person. But here's what I know, and here's what I know God expects of me. No matter how you and I feel about each other personally, God calls us to live in harmony with one another. Now, you think about singing a song. This past Sunday was awesome. It was wonderful to sit even in our parking lot. I know it's not ideal. I get that. But to hear that many people sing songs of praise to God, to knit their voices together in harmony, it was beautiful. And that's the way God looks at us. He says, look, when you all begin to live together in harmony with one another, it's a beautiful thing, and it makes God happy to see that. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly, he says. You know verses 14 and 15, I sort of moved past those, but you're familiar with those. The idea of bless those who persecute you, bless, don't curse them. You've heard verse 15 a lot. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Be there for people regardless of their situation. Just be there for them. That's the idea of living in harmony. And then you get down to verse 18, and I sort of emphasized it as we were reading it together. As far as it depends on you. There's a personal responsibility that you share, that you will answer for, that I will answer for before God. If I'm constantly stirring up things, if I'm constantly causing strife for others, you know what? I'm not holding up my end of the deal that I had with God. God said, I have sent my Son. He has died on the cross for you, so that if you are a baptized believer, if you've been baptized for the remission of your sins, you have the hope of heaven. And because you did that, Scott, here's the deal. I now expect some things from you. And if you're going to be a living sacrifice, if you're going to be spiritually transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you can understand better the will of God, then here's what you and I need to understand. And I'm going to say this. Let's make sure we all understand this together. Those of us who stir up drama, those of us who like to see if we can just get under people's skin, those of us who like to see if we can knock people off their path, you will answer for that. You will answer to God for that behavior. As far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. That's what God expects. Maybe that's not a strong enough word. That's what God demands of us. There are people that are going to do wrong to you, and it's going to be hard in those moments to live peaceably with them. But that's why verses 19 and 20 are so important. Don't avenge yourselves. Leave it to the wrath of God. You know what? Treat everybody like they're your best friend. I know there are going to be people that are going to make that hard. I get that. I understand that. It's hard for me. I'm talking to myself as much as I am anybody else. But no matter what, I understand my expectation before God. Live humbly, look to serve others, live peaceably, live in harmony. I mean, he harps on this all throughout this chapter. It's not something that can be misunderstood or misinterpreted. Paul said exactly what he meant, and he was inspired by God to write it. I know this time has been very difficult for a lot of you. been very difficult for our elders. It's been very difficult for our deacons. It's been very difficult for us as ministers. It's been very difficult for anyone and everyone that works in this local congregation. It has been hard. I get that. I really do. I truly understand it. And here's what you and I can do to sort of aid that. We can make sure that as those who have been spiritually transformed by the renewing of our minds to be living sacrifices, we can be sure that we're living humbly, that we're looking to serve, not looking to take, that we have a genuine love for one another, not something that's fake or based on fake things. We can live peaceably and in harmony with one another. Stress truly can destroy a lot of good things. And right now we are under an immense amount of stress. So let me encourage you in the final moments of this class, pray for your elders. Pray for all the local congregations. This isn't easy. If you think this is an easy decision, you're wrong. Pray for your ministers. Pray for ministers all over this area and all over this country. This has been really difficult for them. It's different. It's outside the box and it's not comfortable. Pray for your fellow members of the congregation. This has been hard. But most importantly, I pray that every person that watches this looks for opportunities to share this good news about who we are and who we represent with everyone they come in contact with. Say that prayer tonight. Say that prayer today. Say that prayer every time you go to God in prayer. Pray that you be given opportunities to share this good news with others. We appreciate you tuning in. We can't wait to see you. We can't wait to all be back to our norm, as it were. But may we never forget what God expects of us in our everyday lives.